afternoon. It's really wonderful to have some time with you.
Wonderful to
And
see you, Ed. It's been a long time. Great to be
yes,
together.
and thank you to everyone who's coming to join us. This is just two old friends, one of my great teachers and beloved teachers. It's a wonderful opportunity for all of us to learn from him. You know, Art, I read your book, your new book, Judaism for the World. And I have to tell you that sometimes in your books, I look at you as Professor Green. Your wonderful biography of Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, your translations of Hasidic texts, and sometimes it's a dean or head of the institution, Arthur Green, when you've been leading institutions. But this one I really read as a rabbi, because you really the voice that you took in this book is the voice of a teacher, offering spirituality, wisdom, guidance, humor, love to all of us who are seeking. All of us who are seeking, and God knows at this moment with pandemic and such chaos outside, all of us are seeking. So I have some questions about the wisdom that you offered us in the book, but let's begin with the project itself. At the end of the book, you make a wonderful statement that your life project has been to build a bridge between classic sources of Hasidic wisdom and contemporary seekers. And I'm wondering how that project of bridge building's coming.
Well, it's going well, Ed. It's going well. First of all, thanks to all of you for being here. It's wonderful to be with you as the snow begins to fall at the beginning of a big snowstorm in Boston. It's great to be with folks in warm California, even if it's not sunny there. And I'm enjoying the opportunity. So thank you all. This is my life is a project. It's been a project for many years. Hasidism saved Judaism for me. I would have wandered away from Judaism were it not for Hasidism. I had gone through a sort of adolescent Orthodox period and then a rebellion against it. And Judaism left me cold at a certain point when I was a young man. And then I began discovering the mystical tradition. When I was a senior in college, Professor Alexander Altman taught the first course on Kabbalah ever taught in an American university. And I was a student in the class. I'd met my friend and mentor Zalman Schachter by then, and he taught me. And it opened up for me the world of Jewish mysticism and Hasidism. And had it not been for Hasidism, had it not been for the sort of alternative vision of what Judaism can be that I found in Hasidism and a kind of neo-Hasidism, I think I would have walked away. Judaism would no longer have interested me. So I felt an obligation to sort of share that with others and try to rescue the wisdom of Hasidism from the Hasidim themselves, who often don't appreciate it in its most profound form, and to try to recreate it and package it in a way that 20th, 21st century Jews could digest it. So that's what it's been all about. I have 3 times in my life made the journey from the secular academy to small Jewish settings of intense personal learning. When I was a graduate student, I founded Chavurat Shalom. I left the University of Pennsylvania for the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. I then had the great honor of inhabiting what had been my own professor's chair at Brandeis. And then again, I left the university behind to create a small, intensive Beit Midrash of future rabbis here at Hebrew College. So I'm used to that pattern of migration from the secular university into something more Jewish where I can be a rabbi and teach the tradition from within without leaving scholarship behind. I continue to write scholarly works and continue to believe in the scholarly discipline, but I do want to teach as a rabbi, and I'm happy you're reading me that way.
So let me ask you a question with a bissel of kvetch in it, which is, you know, I wasn't taught the sources of Jewish mysticism or even Hasidut in Hebrew school. I wasn't even taught that stuff at JTS. I remember the famous story about JTS where I took my rabbinical training was that Gershon Scholem was coming to give a lecture, and they ran to Lieberman, who was the dean, and they asked him, why are we having this man come and talk about this? And Lieberman's answer, the famous answer was, Narishkeit is Narishkeit. Foolishness is foolishness, but the study of Narishkeit is science,
The history
of Narishkeit is science. So where did it go? Where did the mystical tradition go? Why was the mystical tradition, the Hasidic tradition, these gems of wisdom, why were these hidden from us when we were young?
Well, I'm going to give you a historical answer. Um, in the early decades of the 19th century, when Jews were first being accepted as equal human beings in the Western world, remember the first people to accept us as such were liberal Protestants and deists, who began in Germany and France to treat us as human beings. It wasn't Catholics, it certainly wasn't the Eastern Orthodox. It was liberal Protestants and deists. And we felt we had to show them we had a religion just like theirs. We are rational, and we are liberal, and we are enlightened. And anything in Judaism that contradicted that image was swept under the rug. A new concept was created in the early 19th century that never existed before, called, quote, mainstream Judaism. Mainstream Judaism, you've all heard it. When you create a mainstream, you create it in order to exclude something. What's not part of the mainstream? Primarily the mystical, Kabbalistic, Hasidic traditions. Modern westernizing Jews were embarrassed by them. They weren't rational. They weren't liberal. They weren't enlightened. And so they could be swept under the rug. They are no longer really part of Judaism. We probably got it from the Goyim anyway, they would whisper. They're probably not really Jewish, because Judaism, everybody knows, is liberal and enlightened. So therefore, these traditions were not taught. When I was a student at JTS a decade before you, I think, and Heschel was not allowed to teach Hasidism, which was his own field of research, or one of his main fields of research, as one of his regular courses because he was told Hasidism is not mainstream Judaism. He had to teach Maimonides one year and Yehuda Halevi the next year. If he wanted to teach Hasidism to a small group that I was privileged to be part of, he had to do it on his own time in his office, but not as a regular course, not as part of his course load. That consensus about the Jewish mainstream began to collapse around 1980, 1990. Since then, one of the major characteristics of Judaism in our age is that Jews are in search of recovering that lost tradition, that denied tradition. And that search for recovering the hidden tradition ranges from the lowest level, I would say, Kabbalah-centered Judaism, the most commercialized, to the highest level, which is, let's say, Danny Matt's translation of the Zohar, Stanford University Press. But they are all part of this attempt to recover that which was taken from us by this apologetic need to present a rational Judaism in the early 19th century.
So one of I think the principal project of post-Holocaust, post-war Jewish theology really was presented to us by Richard Rubinstein, who basically asked, what kind of God can you possibly believe in after the horrors of Auschwitz? And you have presented in many books, in Seek My Face, Speak My Name, in Radical Judaism, in your idea of the 10 Jewish ideas, and in this book, a remarkable theology. I mean, I love this theology. I remember the first time I read Seek My Face, I'm reading this, and I stood up in the room. I mean, Nina was here. I stood up and said, yes, yes, this works. No, really, seriously, this was so, but it's a radical theology. It's not a theology that most people are ready to hear, because it pushes aside much of the religion I learned as a kid, and challenges me. So I'm going to ask you to do something really unfair. I want you to give me a tamtzit. Give us a summary. You called it monism or pantheism. Talk to me about God, Rabbi. Tell me who God is and where I can find God.
Let me begin. I'm going to begin with my grandmother. I had two grandmothers. One was quite pious, and I learned a lot from that side of the family. But my grandma Green, my father's mother, was an atheist from the old country. And when I decided to go to rabbinical school, she wrote me a letter. I still have it in her night school English, all in one sentence. It goes like this. Dear Arthur, I hear you still want to be a rabbi. I would be prouder of you if you would be a teacher and teach people things that are true. Because if there was a God in the sky, he would be shot down by Sputnik already, period. I owe it to my grandmother not to believe in the kind of God who could be shot down by Sputnik already. Okay, so I do not believe in the old fellow in the sky. That was the God of childhood whom I gave up when I walked away from my adolescent naive attempting to be frum, period. So my understanding of God is entirely different. I don't like the English word God very much, and we don't owe very much to it. It's not a Jewish word. Comes from the old German, from Nordic paganism. But the word Yud He Vav He, which we can pronounce, the name of God in Hebrew, is something entirely different. It's a smushing together of the verb to be. It's Haya, Hove, Yeh, all pushed together in one form that doesn't exist. So it has to be translated not God, but is, was, will be. Yeah? Is, was, will be, which is to say the totality of being is what we're talking about. For me, Havaya, that's how I pronounce it. For me, Havaya is the totality of being. It's all that is. I believe that I'm a monist, not a monotheist, but a monist. It's the next step. Monism is a belief that there is only one. Everything is one. Beneath the substratum of our existence as separate individual beings, there is one being with a capital B. It is the oneness that underlies everything. It is the one that on this planet undergoes the evolutionary process and is there in every creature, from the one-celled animal beneath the sea down to the complexity of the human brain. That same one inhabits and underlies and therefore unifies them all. I believe we are all part of that one. We are all part of that one. The human mind is a fragment of the great universal mind. If you want to use computer imagery, you can say each of us is a way station, is a learning station to the great basic mainframe computer, which is the mind of the one, or the mind of God, if you are okay with that word, the mind of Havaya, which is present in all minds and all being. So we are all part of the one. The one existed before creation. Atahu ad shelo nivra ha'olam, we say in the Siddur, and it exists through its oneness within every creature. So all of us are part of it. So there is no God and. There is no God and, because there's only one. Creation does not mean, therefore, that God is over there and we're over here. But it's that the one has entered into what the Kabbalists call a levush, a garment, a process of covering itself in this coat of many colors called existence. And we are part of that. We are part of that variety of superficial forms that the one has chosen to enter into. And as we turn inward, and I believe all of religious life is about inwardness and the inward journey, as we turn inward, we discover that one within ourselves, within the natural world, and for us as Jews, within the text, within the learning. All of it is a search to go back to that one. And that's what mysticism is all about, after all, the underlying oneness of being.
So if that's the truth, okay, and that's really the underlying truth that underlies all the texts and traditions, so why is so much of the Jewish tradition, and I'm sure other traditions as well, focused on him who lives up there? Mm-hmm. And what is that about? And how do I get past him who lives up there in order to feel the sense of the oneness about me?
It's very hard. You've asked a great question, and it's a struggle in Judaism. Remember, our tradition evolved. Judaism is an evolving religious civilization, said Mordechai Kaplan, yes? And our tradition evolved. We began with a tribal chieftain god who was even more powerful than the gods of Egypt. Michamocha, yes, and we began with a god who was a man of war, our tribe against your tribe. And then that god became somewhat more universal, and the warrior god turned into an educator god, the god who teaches us the ways to live. And then that God entered into the medieval world, and that God turned into a Maimonidean abstraction. And then the Kabbalists came along and it turned into etc., etc., etc. All of those levels are there within the Siddur, for example. All of those levels are there within Jewish consciousness. And the Jewish tradition was created in such a way that we added another level and added another level of understanding without ever saying, I no longer believe in the other ones. They're true, and this is true too, and this is true too. So there are 4 levels of reading scripture. You can go from Pardes, you can go from the outer level to the innermost level. But also we say Shivim Panim La Torah, there's 70 faces in Torah. So there could be 70 different levels of understanding. And always, for a long time, there were Jews who were not satisfied with a superficial level and looked for a deeper level. And that deeper level turns out to be a kind of oneness. Now, in Judaism, they're often afraid to say that out loud. They're afraid to say it because, hey, it's going to mean I'm God. Okay, if everything is God, then I'm God. Then I can do whatever I want and I can do no wrong and I don't sin, right? And there are terrible people who say that, you know. There are terrible people in the world who think they are God. Pharaoh was one of them. Maybe we just had a president who was one of them. But there are terrible rabbis out there. I don't have to mention the names found in Israel who lead cults who say, I am God, I am a personification of God, I can do no wrong. So Judaism is always scared of that. It's a secret. I spent several years reading one of my favorite Hasidic books called the Sfas Emes, the Sfat Emet. I did a selection of it into English called Language of Truth. And I went through the 5 big volumes of teachings. And he hints at this idea over and over again. He hints there's only one nekuda pnimit, there's an innermost point of being, and God is in the innermost point, and everything shares the innermost point. You have to find the innermost point. He never quite says there's nothing but God. And then he discovered in the library a little volume of letters he wrote to his children and grandchildren. And one of these letters he says, okay, now I want to teach you what it means to say the Shema. It doesn't mean there's only one God. It means there's only God. It means everything in this world, physical as well as spiritual, is only God, is God himself. But we have to, that's been hidden to us that by the power of Tzimtzum, God contracted that, hid that, so that it wouldn't be misunderstood, blah, blah, blah. But it took him all, only there could he reveal that's what he really meant. And that's what I really mean. Now, why do I still use the old-fashioned Siddur? I'm a davener. I daven every day. And I use a very traditional Nusach Sfard Siddur. Why do I do it? First of all, because it's what's called in Aramaic, Girsata Diankuta. It's what I learned as a child, and I love it. But I also want to say it's very hard to have a personal relationship to the oneness of being. How do I reveal my soul to the oneness of being? How do I say what I love and what I need and what I care about, what's breaking my heart, to the oneness of being? It's hard to talk to the oneness of being. So I let my tradition help me project a human figure onto the oneness of being. Maybe you can say, I give the only gift I have to give, which is the gift of my humanity. I make God in my image so that I can talk to God. Or maybe, Hillel Zeitan was the first to say this that I know of, because we sense that God has made us in God's image, we are obliged to return the favor. And we make God in our image. We recreate God as a person so that we can relate to the God in a personal way. But I know that's a projection. I understand that's a projection. And I let myself do it. I don't begrudge myself the right to project.
So let's spell out some of the implications of this so that we can really dwell in this idea for a while. Now, let's begin with one of the more difficult ones. When people suffer, they often turn toward heaven, sometimes asking for help, sometimes asking, why me? Sometimes they shout at heaven, how could this have happened to me? Job's moment.
Mm-hmm.
If I accept God as the all, so how does the God as the all, how does that touch me in that moment of personal pain and suffering?
First of all, Jews have a right to shout. Everybody has a right to cry out, and that crying out is good and it's honest, and that's right. That's an important part of prayer. It's not the only part of prayer, but it's a very important part of prayer. This year, we're feeling it more than ever. In this past month, I lost one of my best friends from my college years, and a rabbi who was a classmate of mine in rabbinical school to COVID. So there's a lot to cry out about these days. There's no answer. There's no answer. Why do the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper? My friend, there's no answer. Nature is indifferent to us and our needs. But the one is with us always, and we are always part of it. Imo anoche b'tzara is real. I am with you in suffering. I am with you in your suffering. I believe in a God that is present to us. That is present to us. We are not alone. We are not abandoned. There is a sense that we partake of something greater than ourselves, and that of which we are a part is therefore with us and present to us. So we uplift our moment of our suffering and take it back to the one and say, yes, I recognize this too is part of the one. It's hard. I recognize this too is part of the one. I believe with the Zohar, with the great work of Kabbalah, I believe the Zohar understands that God's self is struggling against the presence of evil. If there's only one, then evil comes from God, just like good comes from God. Suffering comes from God, just like joy comes from God. Over here, over there. Poo-poo suffering is something else. No, it all comes, ultimately, it all comes from the same one that we come from. But the one is engaged in a great struggle toward wholeness, toward goodness, toward oneness. And we are part of that struggle. And so we stand up, we line ourselves up with the forces of good in the world, with the forces of wholeness and acceptance. But we are of the one, we are part of the one, and that one, if we open our hearts to it, that one is with us in the tough moments too. That's my experience in life.
Does the one have consciousness, will? Is there something more than the all, than the universe? Is there a person there? Is someone listening to me when I pray, or is it am I the consciousness and will of the universe?
You see, we are human beings, and so you're asking the question as though it were a human being. Is there someone listening? As though listening. The Rambam already says, no, God has no ears, right? Because ears are physical. Therefore, the word shomea here, when it replies to God, must mean something entirely different that we don't understand. That's already Maimonides. But let's go beyond that and say, in a humanoid way, the answer is no. God does not plan in advance. God does not have foreknowledge. God does not have consciousness the way you have consciousness of being Ed Feinstein and I have consciousness of being Art Green. But if the one is one, then all of past, present, and future is there in it at once. All of mind, your mind and my mind, are within it as one. It is greater than all mind. It is the totality of all mind and beyond. So of course, all of mind and all of consciousness is there within it, but not in this separate, ordered fashion that we experience it as human beings. So it is part of the one, it is all part of the one, but we see it in these limited and consequential ways. So it's a different kind of, it's a mystical oneness of mind, not a sort of intelligent design, oh, God must have chosen to do this oneness of mind.
The chapter you wrote on prayer in this book is poetic. It's compelling. It took 3 readings to go through it to really I'm talk about prayer. What is the experience of prayer, especially for those of us for whom God is difficult, for whom Hebrew is difficult, for whom synagogue services are impossible? What is prayer? What is it supposed to be? What is it supposed to do? Why is it valuable?
You know, the first book I wrote, I was in my late 20s. I did a little book called Your Word is Fire. It's a collection of Hasidic teachings on contemplative prayer, and I translated it together with my friend Barry Holtz. We and our wives had a cabin on the coast of Maine one summer, and we translated it together. And when I went through these teachings, Hasidic teachings on prayer, which I had learned from Heschel, the one that struck me most and that continues to stick with me is by Reb Pinchas of Koretz, who was a contemporary of the Baal Shem Tov, and he said it in one line. I'll say it in Hebrew in the original. I mean, he said it in Yiddish, I'm sure, but it's written in the original. Ha'olam svurin shemitpalalim lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu ve'eino ken. People think you pray to God, and that is not the case. Ela hatfilah hi etzem elahut mamash. But prayer itself is of the divine essence. People think you pray to God, but that's not the case. As though, is there anybody listening? Anybody on the other end of the line? No, there's nobody on the other end of the line. Because the listening is in the saying. The listener is right here. Because prayer is a sacred process. You are opening your heart. You are turning inward. You are expressing your deepest longings before the one who exists throughout the universe. You are calling out to that one. That is prayer. We say, there's a line from the Psalms that we say in the daily Siddur, V'ata kadosh yoshev tehilot Yisrael. You, O Holy One, are seated amid the prayers of Israel. Where is God seated? Yoshev, V'ata kadosh yoshev. You're sitting in the prayer. You're sitting in the middle of the prayers. In ancient times, where did we say God sat? God was Yoshev HaKruvim. The cherubim in the ark were extended. They were like a seat for God to sit over the tablets. God was Yoshev HaKruvim. But now God is Yoshev Tehilot Yisrael. God dwells right there in the act of prayer. In the act of prayer, that's the holy act. It's not that there's somebody listening or not over there. Hey, say it louder. He might be asleep, right? That's as Elijah said to the priests of Baal. No. It's not someone out there is listening up in the sky. No, it's that the listening voice and the speaking voice are the same because it's the divine voice that speaks through us. We say Adonai sfatai tiftach, Lord, open my lips before we say the Amidah, because the real word is not the word I'm speaking, but somehow the word that's being spoken through me and being heard through me, and I'm like an echo chamber. Harem keshofar kolecha, the prophet says of prayer, lift up your voice like a shofar. The Maggid of Medrash says, yes, we are just a shofar. It's the divine voice blowing itself through us. We're just a shofar to magnify the voice. So it's that act of prayer that we have to open ourselves to, and then you go back to Heschel, and Heschel's speaking so beautifully about prayer in man's quest for God. But for me, it's that. No, it's not your praying to, but it's the act of prayer in which you turn to your heart. And prayer is as much about listening as it is about speaking. The Talmud says about the Shema, let your ear hear what your mouth is saying. And sometimes we just have to listen. I could listen to the snow falling today. Listen to that silence, and that could be an act of prayer. And it's about leaving behind all our pretenses and all our external concerns and all our outward concerns, and just being open to the life of the heart. And that's what prayer is, being open to the life of the, recognizing there is a life of the heart. And maybe that life of the heart is all just a manifestation of the big heart, of the capital H1 heart of the world, which is what God is, the heart of the world. And that heart of the world is manifest in our heart. And if we turn ourselves, if we attune ourselves to listen to it, we can hear it playing in our heart. We can hear its music playing in our heart. And that's what prayer is, to attune us, to that song within our heart that we're usually too busy and too well defended to let sing.
So how do I start? I want to pray. But I don't want to go to a service. I don't read Hebrew. I don't own a prayer book, or I own a prayer book, but I haven't opened it since my bar mitzvah. I want to feel, I want to know I want to feel what you just said. How do I start, Rebbe? Where do I start?
Get up at sunrise. Get up before sunrise. Go to a place where you can see the day happening. You can see the day happening. And watch the miracle. It's not accidental. It's one of the greatest pieces of wisdom built in our tradition, that the two sacred times of dawn and dusk are miraculous moments, are moments of wonder. We had a Korban Shel Shachar and Korban Shel Ben Arbaim. They were the two times of sacrifice, neither the two times of prayer. Get up before dawn and see that morning happening. Find yourself a phrase from the prayer book, one that you know. I like Yachid Chei Olamim, single one, life of the world. Yachid Chei Olamim. But you could take Adonai Echad, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. I don't care which one you take, and chant it. Chant it to yourself. Chant it to yourself with your eyes closed. 100 times or more. Let it go. Let it turn over in your mind. And then just be quiet. Become quiet. And open your eyes. And be present to that dawn. Be present to that moment of dawn. If you're up early enough, you might hear the birds singing half an hour before dawn, because the birds know when dawn is coming. The birds, of course, get ready for that event of dawn. And then that you're chanting, join the song of the birds and be as natural as the bird song, waiting for dawn. And then maybe you learn to do it after dawn as well. Maybe you'll learn to be able to daven something called shachar at dawn service, even at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. But I would say that's a good beginner's exercise for me, for my kind of religion,
So let me extend you a little bit more. In your time of religion, in your kind of religion, what does mitzvah mean? What is halacha? What does it mean to say that an act is a mitzvah, is commandment, a ritual? What's the function of a mitzvah? And what's its source? What's its authority over me?
First, let me do some etymology. The word mitzvah in Hebrew, of course, means commandment. But the Hasidim a long time ago said, no, it comes from the word tzavta. Tzavta, in which in Aramaic means together. A mitzvah is a place or a moment or an opportunity when you and God can be together. When you are present to the divine presence in that act. So when you hold that lulav and esrog in your hands, or when you give that tzedakah, or when you feed that poor person on the bread line, those are all mitzvahs. In those mitzvahs, whether it's a ritual form or an interpersonal kind of mitzvah, you and the presence of the one are together in that act. You are joining. It's an opportunity for holiness. It's an opportunity to discover, to open your heart to the miraculous presence in that act, in that moment. It's taking the mem, which the mem is a place like makom or mikdash or mishkan. It's a place where something happens. It's the mem of location, and saying it's the mitzvah. It's the mem of being together. It's the mem of joining together. I do not believe you understand in a God who commanded that we must do these things. I'm far from that. My kind of God does not speak in human language and give us specific commandments. I don't know a God who watches me and say, don't eat that cheeseburger, tie that straps around your arm this morning, don't forget. I'm very far, I've wandered very far away from that kind of conception of God, so let me be honest and say that quite openly. I do mitzvot, I like mitzvot. I do mitzvot because I love them. Because I love them. I don't think there's any other reason to do them except out of love. I think the old other reasons to be scared, God's going to punish me if I don't do them, or I have to do them because 6 million Jews died, all those terutzim, all that guilt, all the guilt burdens of why to do mitzvot, that's gone. Or because God said it and I must do it, for me that's gone too. Fortunately, I have one thing left, I have love. And I love this way of life, I love this tradition. I've spent my life loving, and all I can do with my students is share that love with them. I can't say you gotta, because it's a mitzvah. I can say, this is a place where I find an occasion to be present to that love. And I want to show you and share it with you. That's all I got. Now, the word halacha, I want to say something about. I don't like the translation of halacha as law. Halacha means walking. It comes from halicha, from to walk. The concept of halacha is a reification of the commandment, v'halachta bidrachav. We should walk in God's ways. How do you walk in God's ways? That's halacha, walking in God's ways. For example, mahu rachum v'chanun afatarachum v'chanun. Just as God is merciful and compassionate, so you be merciful and compassionate. Just as God visits the sick and buries the dead and all those things, so you do too. That's halacha. That's walking the path. As long as halacha is walking the path, I can say, yes, I'm a halachic Jew. Once you say it's law, find me getting off the train. Because law means you've got to, you must, and every Jew must. And if not, if somebody violates the law, they deserve punishment. I know a man who just violated the law a lot, and I hope he gets punished. A certain man whose name I won't mention. I want people who transgress the law to be punished. I don't want people who eat cheeseburgers to be punished. Not by people and not by God. I don't think they should be punished. They've made their choices. I think they're missing something. I think they're missing the opportunity that I find in a mitzvah. They're missing that expression of love. But to say that it's law and that therefore law is obligatory on everybody, I've lost that. That's no longer a part of my Judaism, even though I happen to be a very traditionally observant Jew. But because I've chosen to do so, I can say it's a discipline that I have chosen. Discipline is okay. If I choose a discipline, let's say I did yoga positions every day, which believe me, I don't. If I choose a discipline, then I obligate myself to do it. But if I don't do it, well, I missed it today. I didn't do it today. I lost something. I lost out. I'll be better tomorrow. I'll be better disciplined tomorrow. But if you say it's a law, what's called a heteronomous law, somebody outside me imposes it upon me, and if I don't do it, I'm a transgressor, I'm not there.
In your book, Radical Judaism, and then again in this book, Judaism for the World, you call for a theology of creation. And you make the point that Jews, of the moments of our relationship with God, of revelation and redemption, creation's the least of them, and that Jews have become alienated from nature. We think of it as gashmius as opposed to ruchnius, something that's, trees are trees. You go learn Gemara. But you say it's time that we return to a fellowship with nature and a certain attitude toward nature. So talk to us about a Jewish theology of creation and what difference that makes.
Yeah. Well, it makes all the difference because now the world in which we live is so threatened. The great issue of our time is the climate issue, is the survival of this planet as a fit habitation for human life and all higher forms of life. This is the moment when we need to go back to creation. You know, in the 20th century, Jews didn't want to talk much about creation. They want to talk about revelation and mitzvah. That was Heschel's generation. Then they wanted to talk about Jewish national identity, of course, and Israel and Jewish peoplehood. That was Fackenheim and Hartman's generation in some ways. But now, and creation wasn't something we wanted to talk about, because the truth is, we didn't want to join the Scopes trial people and say, we don't believe in evolution. The world is only 5,781 years old. That's what the Lubavitcher Rebbe said. No, you must believe in creation literally. And that's a little silly, because we know the world is 4.5 billion years old and not 5,800 years old. And the fossils weren't put there just to test our faith. They're real, and so on. So we weren't people like that. We wanted our kids to get into medical school. And you can't get into medical school if you don't believe in evolution. So of course we were educated people, but we were embarrassed. We didn't know what to believe. So we shut up about it. Creation wasn't talked about. But I think we have to go back and talk about it now. Listen, I lift my cup every Friday night and make Kiddush. It's the most meaningful, regular ritual act I do. It's full of meaning to me, like the cup is full of wine. But it's not. What's my relationship to that story? I'm not a believer in the literal sense in the 7-day creation, or maybe you say 7 periods. No. But creation is our Jewish and Christian, by the way, it's our Judeo-Christian language for talking about the world is filled with divine presence. The world is miraculous. It is natural, but it's not just natural. It's also supernatural. Here I go back to a debate we would have had 20 years ago with some of our Reconstructionist friends. Yes, I believe in naturalistic religion, but I believe the supernatural resides within the natural. It is the natural seen with the eyes of wonder. No, I don't believe that God changes the works of nature. God makes the sea split or the sun stand still. But I believe we see it that way. It's all about nis nistar. It's all about the hidden miracles, the miracles that are with us every day. Those are the natural miracles of life. But it is wondrous enough. Life is wondrous enough. I mean, hey, we are part of this journey. We are part of this journey called evolution. It was a journey that we made from being one-celled creatures under the sea to crawling up onto dry land, to the division between plants and animals, to the emergence of the human brain, which we're just beginning to understand. That's the great sacred story. That's the evolutionary journey is the greatest of all sacred narratives. It's greater than the story of Mount Sinai. It's greater than the story of Jesus Christ. It's greater than the story of Muhammad or Buddha. The sacred story is the journey of the one through this long course of evolution. We are still part of it. Evolution is still going on. As you pass down the tradition and educate your grandchildren, you're partaking of evolution. Not only their Judaism and their culture, but also at some point their life will be richer because your generation contributed to it and lived. So as they inherit our genes, so they inherit our culture and our traditions. That's all part of the evolutionary process. I have an evolutionary approach not only to nature, but also to Judaism. And I think each generation has to contribute to the ongoing evolution, and that enriches what we pass on to the future. So that's all creation theology. Creation is ongoing. God renews creation every day. Creation is an ongoing process. We are part of it. And that's why I have called upon my students. If you want to be my students, you may join in the mitzvah, specific mitzvah I've called upon my students to do. My students, every day, after davening in the morning, we do it at our minyan here at Hebrew College, and I encourage it everywhere. After davening, even if you don't daven, I won't tell, even if you don't daven, every day of the week we say the Yom, the Ma'amad, the day of creation. On Sunday we say, in the Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning God created. This morning I said, Yehi rakia b'toch hamayim. God said, let there be a firmament. Tomorrow I'll say Ki Tov twice. I'll say, God said, let the waters be gathered, and so on. Each of the 6 days we say the Ma'amad, day of creation, for that day, so that we complete the cycle of creation every week. When we make Kiddush and say, Vayichulu hashamayim va'aretz, heaven and earth were completed. But I want people to do that not just as another ritual to add to rituals, but as a reminder that living in a created world is our way of saying we care and will act responsibly and will be part of this great cause of our time. Everything else is a distraction. Trump and Schmump and Gedump is all a distraction from the real urgent issue of our age, which is the survival of this planet. And we Jews are a tiny, tiny part of humanity, but we have to line up with Christians and Muslims and Buddhists, people, great people like the Pope and the Dalai Lama, who have really called for tremendous activism in this. We have to take a real role in that. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now.
No. It's beautiful. It's a great sermon. Thank you. It's a wonderful, and God knows it's going to be heard in many synagogues, including mine, this coming Yom Tov.
Wonderful, wonderful.
As we get close to the end, I want to ask you to think about the contemporary Jewish world. You called the book Judaism for the World.
Mm-hmm.
And as I look at the Jewish world, I see a split people. I see people on the one side who are deeply obsessed with Jewish particularity, even tribalism, and really have nothing to say to the world. They've turned inward and they want to protect what is Jewish. They want to protect Israel. They want to protect. There's a great deal of fear there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I see people on the other side who have abandoned almost any connection with authentic sources and aspects of Jewish life because they're devoted to the world. They're universalists in the best sense of the world, but they've lost connection with us. And I hear you trying to stake out a place in the middle. So for a moment, talk to us, rather talk to those two. Talk to the tribalist who's missing missing part of his Torah and his heart, and talk to the universalist who's missing part of his Torah and his heart, and tell us where we should be.
In Hebrew, we say, "Echoz bazeh v'gam mizeh al tanach yadecha." Grab onto this one, but don't let go of that other one either. Right, of course. You know, because I'm an independent of denominational label Jew and pretty observant, I spend a lot of time in Israel every year. And I get invited in Israel, something that happens there that could never happen here. I get invited sometimes to speak in yeshivas, in sort of modern Orthodox yeshivas, places like Ma'ale Gilboa, Yeshivat Siach, sort of modern Orthodox yeshivas where young men are studying. And they say, this guy Green, people want to read him. Let's invite him to speak. And I spoke at 2 of those yeshivot last year. Last winter, I went to Israel for the winter and I stayed for the corona. I was there for 6 months because I couldn't come home. It was wonderful. And I was met at 2 yeshivas, and the young men loved it. And after them, I got the same question in both places. They said, the young men raised their hands and willingly, happily, and said, oh, where did you get this idea that Judaism has something to say to the world? The Torah was given to us. Does it have anything to say to Goyim? Where did you get the idea Judaism has anything to say to Goyim? And I was a little bit shocked, and then I realized that's what it is to be educated in the ghetto. You know, in the ghetto, you don't think about people outside the ghetto. Remember, the world is divided into 2 equal parts, Haaretz and Chutz Laaretz. And so there's too much of that still exists in the Jewish world. If there's one God, if there's only one, ultimately there's only one teaching. There's only one truth. Our particular Torah, our teaching, Torah means teaching, our teaching is a version of that. Our teaching is a way to say it in Jewish language, to express the universal truth in Jewish language. It has specific characteristics which are wonderful, which I love, that's why I'm here, but it is our language for the universal truth. And that truth applies to everybody. We have things to give to the world. When we were called a nation of priests, Mamlechet Kohanim, if you're a priest, there has to be a congregation out there for you to be a priest to. We have something to teach the world. We have something to give. And we should be involved in giving it. First of all, I really believe that that the late, I'm now blocking his name, Alex Schindler was right in saying we Jews should become more actively proselytizing than we are. I welcome conversion. some of my very best rabbinical students are people who were Jews by choice, and I'm delighted at serious conversion, and think we should make more room and open our arms more. But even people who aren't converting to Judaism, I think we have something to give. I think Shabbat is one of the great gifts we Jews have to give to the world, and it's more needed now than ever in this time of the speeding up of crazy speeding up of human consciousness in this electronic, zoomy, email age. I think we need Shabbat. The world needs Shabbat. I think we have other things to give to the world, but we have things to learn from others also, and that's okay. I don't mind when I hear about yoga in synagogues or meditation techniques brought from the East into Judaism. That's okay. We can learn, but we have a lot to give and to teach also. We could give Shabbat to the world. We could teach the world how to love an ancient tradition and reinterpret like crazy, reinterpret forever. That's a great freedom we have, that other traditions that Islam could learn from us, for example. That it's okay to reinterpret. They lost some of that ability at a certain point in their history, and we lost some of that nerve at a certain point in our history too. So I think we have lots to give. I lost the question already this time. Where were we? That's all right.
No, you're answering the tribalist on one side
Yes,
and the
yes.
universalist
So
on the
yes,
other side.
so the tribalist is there. Listen, I'm an ethnic Jew. You know, I speak Yiddish and I love knishes, and I have lots of tribal things about me. I grew up in a corner of Eastern Europe, transplanted to northern New Jersey, and I used to sit in shul with my grandfather and laugh at Mr. Leimitz because he said Ein Kalakaini instead of Ein Kalokenu. He was a Galicianer, and we laughed. We Litvaks laughed at the Galicianer. You know, I come from that world, and I have great affection for that world still. But I see how dangerous it is too, especially in an age when Jews have political power. And in Israel, we rule over a non-Jewish minority and don't treat them well enough. They're very serious problems. So the teaching that every human being was made in the image of God. The line in the Talmud that says, why did God create just one human being so nobody could say, my father was greater than your father? That's more important, my friends, than all the knishes in the world, than all the ethnic singularity. So yes, we are a distinct ethnic group, and I want us to survive and thrive, and I care about Jewish peoplehood. I believe in Jewish peoplehood. I tell my students all the time, no, you're not just an American clergyman of the Jewish persuasion. You're a leader of the Jewish people, and you have to be committed to the Jewish people to lead the Jewish people. I care about that. But I care about that because the Jewish people have something worthwhile to give the world and something worthwhile to say. And so we have to preserve the Jewish people not as an end in itself, but because we have a mission. We have something to give to the world. We are here to remind the world about Tselem Elohim, that every human being is the image of God. We are here to pass on that teaching and to say it and to call it out loudly, and therefore to see that people treat each other that way. That's part of our Jewish mission. And yes, we have to survive to do that mission. But when survival becomes an end in itself, we lose the point. So yeah.
And to the universalist.
Keep the tribe going for the right reasons.
But now give me the other side of it. To the universalist, to the kid who tells me, what do I got to be Jewish for? I just want to fix the world. What's he missing? What does he need?
I say to him, God bless you, fix the world. But fixing the world is very hard work. You will get tired at some point. And the inspiration of a spiritual life, the ability to turn inward, is something you're going to need to nourish that constant energy of speaking the world. And I say, if you can't learn it from the Jews, learn it from our Afro-American neighbors. Look how important the resources of the church are in the transformation that became, and still needs to be, the civil rights movement. Look at how deeply rooted it is in the spiritual life of people in the church. We have that. That's their language. I don't want to copy it, but we have that deep-rooted spirituality in our language. So learn enough to root yourself in it, to find it, to find yourself in singing that psalm, chanting that psalm, or singing that Hebrew song, wherever you do it, because it's going to give you the freshness and the renewal power to keep doing that work you want to do to transform the world.
Yeah.
I had an Aunt Ruth. And Aunt Ruth used to say, she was my mother's sister, Alehena Shalom. She used to always say, when I was a kid, how do you say that in Jewish? She was trying to talk to Tante so-and-so who understood only Yiddish. How do you say it in Jewish meant, how do you say it in Yiddish? But I like that question. How do you say it in Jewish? It's not only that we have it's not that we have an exclusive message. It's that we have a message with universal echoes, but we have a distinct way of saying it. And learning how you say it in Jewish is a worthwhile thing to do.
Spending an hour with Rabbi Moreno Rabbeinu Arthur Green is a great gift and a great honor and a great privilege. Thank you, Art, for sharing your Torah and your neshama with us. And thank you to Ari and to the people at CSP and to Neil for supporting and for everyone who makes this possible. Thank you so very much. And we'll turn the program over to Ari.
To you, Rabbi Ed Feinstein. Thank you for doing this.
Always a joy.
It's been a real pleasure to have this dialogue with you.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Rabbi Feinstein and Rabbi Green, for being with us today. I was texting with Rabbi Feinstein saying we could go on for hours. I was going to not tell you the time and we'll just go on for hours and just record this amazing discussion and great questions. So I think this is a great program. Those of you who are with us with Ariel Berger for the month, see how this ties in. This is a modern day Rebbe here who's connected to much of what we learned. My only question for you, Rabbi Green, is since you're so involved and you translated many of these great Rebbes that we learned about, do you have a favorite Rebbe, Hasidic master, that you wanted to share with us, and the name of who that might be? I have to unmute you. Hold on.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes. These days, for many years, I wrote a book on Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, but he's not my own favorite because Bratslav is very complicated. These days, Rabbi Menachem of Chernobyl, who wrote a book called Me'or Einayim. It's a classic of early Hasidic literature, and I love him. And I've translated that book into English. It's called The Light of the Eyes. And it will come out. Stanford University Press is putting it out next month. It's coming out in March. It's a big book. It's a teachings on the weekly parsha, and he is such a healthy, this world-loving, world-embracing kind of Hasidic teacher. So the Chernobler and the Me'or Einayim, the Light of the Eyes, is my favorite these days. And I urge you to get that translation. I'm going to be teaching a course on it, Hebrew College, after Pesach. I'm going to be teaching a second 8-week course on that book. So those of you who want to can sign up at Hebrew College and get the book, The Light of the Eyes, and you'll see he's a wonderful, really enlightened Hasidic master.
Thank you. So thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Rabbi Green, for being with us. And let me put the view here so you can see everybody. We had a nice group from around the country. I wanted to thank everybody. And again, particularly Rabbi Feinstein and his crew from Valley Beth Shalom for being with us today. I hope we'll have you back for some more teaching, Rabbi Green. And
great to see you. I hope so. Invite me and we'll see what happens. Yes.
Yeah, well, you have another book coming. I guess you produce a book every year. So it means we're going to have you back at least once a year.
Okay, all of this.
But thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Have a great day. Be safe out there. Thank you, Rabbi Feinstein. And keep warm if you're on the East Coast or the West Coast. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good one.